Alright, welcome once again to Half Broke Movie Mayhem. Thanks for checking out the other videos. This time, I'm going to be going over the top 6, I don't know why 6, just 6, the top 6 Oscar mistakes. Now, when I say that, I'm not going to go back to, like, all time. It's going to be more like the past 50 years. You know, going back to, say, 1930s or 40s or whatever and trying to dig up the, maybe mistakes in the winners versus the nominees and stuff would be way too much work, so to speak. And honestly, if you go back that far, the number one mistake ever is probably Citizen Kane not winning the Best Picture. Because it's kind of funny that critics slammed that back when everybody dogged that movie, and now it's considered to be the, if not the greatest American film ever. So, without further ado, let's get this going. And number 6 Oscar mistake is in 2017, The Shape of Water winning Best Picture over Dunkirk. The Shape of Water is a good movie. It's imaginative, it's cool, but it's not great. It's just, it's good. Dunkirk was I don't even know, I can't even describe how great that movie is. The shots in that movie, the way it flows, the way it brings the 3 different timelines of a day, an hour, and a week together is just crazy. There's shots in it you're wondering how he did that, because Nolan is not a big special effects dude. So it's hard to even consider how he even did some of this stuff in this movie. And it literally, as soon as you get into the movie, hits the gas and goes. So that is number 6, Dunkirk not winning over Best Picture. Number 5 is 2005 when Crash won Best Picture. Here's another example of a good, kind of great movie winning Best Picture over a movie that should have clearly won. And I almost think the Academy was afraid to pull the trigger to give Brokeback Mountain the Best Picture. I think they were, it's one of those things. The Academy has a history of really digging a movie, but aren't brave enough to give it Best Picture. And I do believe, because of the content in this movie, I believe they were afraid to pull the trigger. Brokeback Mountain should have won it. The performances in that movie, especially Heath Ledger, is top notch. The direction, Ang Lee, it was clearly the better movie than Crash. Its legacy is still carrying on today when people think about movies, versus Crash, which is just kind of, people forget about it. So, I'm just saying, that is number 5, Crash winning over Brokeback Mountain that year. Number 4 is 1990. If anybody remembers back then, Dances with Wolves won Best Picture. Do not get me wrong, it is a great movie. And what's even crazier about Dances with Wolves is that Costner directed it and starred in it, but it was the fact that every one of his biggest movies were baseball movies. And he kind of self-financed a lot of this movie at the time because nobody was taking him seriously over wanting to make a movie that was what Dances with Wolves was. And so I get all of that, but when you go back and you look at the nominations that year, it takes me a minute to even say this, because I don't even have to give an explanation after I say what I'm about to say. Dances with Wolves won Best Picture over Goodfellas. Number 3 is 1994. Forrest Gump won Best Picture that year. It is a great film. Tom Hanks' performance is one of the greatest of all time. No doubt about it. The effects in that movie are great. But when you look at the other films that were nominated for Best Picture that year, you are looking also at Pulp Fiction and Shawshank Redemption. And when you think of the longevity of everything, Shawshank Redemption, if you go online, especially Rotten Tomatoes or IMDb, it is literally the highest rated film ever. That movie is perfect in every sense of the word. And what Tarantino was doing with Pulp Fiction changed filmmaking forever. To think that neither one of those movies won Best Picture over Forrest Gump it's another thing of where they felt like they were needed to take the safe pick, especially when it comes to Pulp Fiction. And I think that it was a sham that it won over those two films. So it's just my opinion. So number 2 and 1. Number 2 and 1 kind of walk hand in hand a little bit here. And it'll make sense by the end. Number 2 is 1974. Godfather 2 wins Best Picture. And Al Pacino is up for Best Actor. Okay? And loses to Art Carney in Harry and Tonto. Now, I know that a lot of people out there in YouTube land aren't film buffs. Okay? I get it. But there are plenty of films back in the day that everybody remembers. Who here has ever heard of Harry and Tonto? Okay. Al Pacino's acting in The Godfather Part 2 is perfect. It is one of the few acting performances in history that when you see it, it is flawless. Flawless. One of the few. It's flawless. And to think that he didn't win Best Actor is just mind-boggling to me. What's even more mind-boggling that year was Art Carney was not even the second best. That same year in the nominations was Jack Nicholson for Chinatown. How Art Carney won over those two performances is blasphemy, in my opinion. And it was so blasphemous that the Academy tries to fix it. And that leads us to number 1. And number 1 is 1992. Okay? And it is this performance by the actor that should have won in 1992. It's hard to explain. You lose yourself in his performance to the point that you forget you're watching him and not watching the character he is portraying, the historical character. And I think it was a twofold problem. But the biggest thing was that year Al Pacino won for Scent of a Woman. Not that that wasn't a great performance, it was. But it almost felt like they gave it to Al Pacino as an apology, as a, whoops, we're sorry, we messed up with Godfather 2. So we're going to give it to you now for this movie. The problem was is they didn't give it to Denzel Washington for Malcolm X. His portrayal in that movie, I mean, stories back then were that he would get so caught up in the speeches in that movie that when they would cut, he would still keep going. He was so caught up in his character. You forget you're watching Denzel Washington, and that you actually start believing you're watching Malcolm X himself. Go back and watch old Malcolm X clips or listen to him speak, and then watch that movie, and you realize how great of a performance that is. And the other problem, I think, is with that not winning, I think the Academy just didn't like Spike Lee. After the comments he made back with Do the Right Thing, I just think they were pissed off on him. They went with what they thought was safe, and it gave them the means to apologize to Al Pacino for Godfather Part 2. But the number one mistake the Oscars ever had was not giving the Best Actor Academy Award in 1992 to Denzel Washington for Malcolm X. So, I hope you liked this video. If you did, like, subscribe, hit the little bell. Leave a comment down there. Tell me what you think is a mistake. Or did you not agree with one of mine? So, thanks for checking this out. Until next time, watch movies. Peace.